You're listening to This Week in E-Commerce, the Ecom Nation podcast. Dive into the top online retail headlines with your hosts, Paul Waddy and Mal Chia. Let's load up the cart. This Week in E-Commerce, episode 30. We have hit the big 30. I am Mal Chia, and with me, as always, is Paul Waddy. Paul, happy 30th.
Yeah, hit 30, which is my age. Incredible. Time flies. Happy 30th.
Yes, indeed. That's why we're marking this occasion. It is quite a feat, I think. You know, there's so many podcasts nowadays, and you go through Spotify. God, I do that all the time. Spotify, and you look through it and go like, oh, it's only lasted like 3 episodes of this. And there's some great names for podcasts that I've occasionally looked at and going like, I wish I had that name. It's like, oh, someone's taken that.
Every name has been taken, and usually they're not still running.
Yeah, that's right. I remember my first podcast, Communication Junction. I did that. God, that was 15 years ago. We started that.
Wow.
Yeah, 2008 thereabouts, I think. So back when I was still working at Adelaide Uni. So it has been a long time. I feel so old now. So. But by the time this is going to be coming out, it is going to be Easter. Paul, any plans for Easter? How's your Easter looking like?
Well, it's also my middle child, Lila's birthday. So we will do a little bit of a joint celebration. It'll be fun.
Ah, fantastic.
Well, what about you?
You know what? Actually, no, it won't be Easter. What am I talking about? It's going to be the week before Easter. So I think I've got ahead of myself in 1 week. So look, Easter's a lot of family time, I think. So we are jumping ahead of ourselves. My dates are all messed up at the moment, but yes, so it's a lot of family time. So it's going to be fun.
Good.
It's Oscar's birthday this Sunday, I should say. So he's turning 5. And Lila's turning 4.
Lila's turning 4. Yeah, the following week. So there you go.
Yeah, very close together. Lovely.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll see what's going to happen with all the sales. Apparently, Afterpay Day did not set the world on fire.
Yeah, I sort of feel that a little bit. Interesting. I also didn't hear much about it. It kind of crept up on me a little bit. I was like, oh yeah, but I didn't hear a lot about it. And I'm not seeing, too many record numbers being cracked. I think
I've been bombarded. A lot of SMS. A lot of SMS.
You know who I think's done it well is Proud Poppy, a brand that we work with. Tara's done a really good job there. Was on TV last week on Sunrise talking about it, and has been busy breaking plates in the warehouse with the challenge to her team, to her customers, to try and break the new website. So I thought that was a good, fun way of looking at it. That kind of stood out to me.
Well, I guess it is a lovely new website. I was on there the other day, going like, oh, I guess they've done a really good job on here.
Yeah, as seen on 7 Sunrise. So straight up, got it up straight up. Well done, Tara and team.
Love that. Well done, guys. All right, we're going to dive straight into our first story of the day. We've got quite a bit to cover, but we're going to cover off some heavier news first, and some news which I think we've sort of been privy to it, just kind of under the shroud of darkness for the last few months. That Age has axed 20 head office roles in a strategic review. Now, as some of you might remember, last year, Age, with much fanfare, announced quite a significant restructure of the business. Where they had restructured to essentially split the business into 3, have the Age Collective, and then under the Age Collective have the separate brands of an Age for the luxury label brand Age, then Age Athletica, and then Ikari, which is the skincare brand, all sitting as sub-businesses within that. So it was quite a significant restructure at the time. I thought like a fairly bold move. And with that, what was interesting about that was that they decided to service those with 3 different teams. So having Age Athletica, Ikari, all sitting there with 3 different CEOs, 3 different brand teams, 3 different digital teams. I thought that was quite interesting. And that there was going to be a lot of duplication of effort, I felt. I guess, if your business is going on that path, it's great, but it looks like they've now undone all of that and are going back to a more centralized, streamlined organizational structure.
Interesting. It's weird to split out, not really to split out the 3 brands, but to give them 3 different teams. It does feel a bit top heavy in terms of 3 CEOs. You'd hate to see their wage bill, I reckon. But yeah, I think in a year of really buckling down and trying to kind of save money and operate in a really lean fashion, I don't know the business well enough. We know some people there, and I think, Nadia's fantastic, Nadia Lotter and Will and so on. But you would think that it hasn't worked, Mal. My idea that they're top heavy is probably vindicated or validated by the fact that they've let 20 people go. I think 20 managers go potentially. So it feels top heavy, and it sounds like they probably invested for growth. If you haven't read my newsletter from the weekend, please do.
I was about to say, because that actually resonated quite a lot with that. But also with what I posted on LinkedIn last week as well about the importance of foundations. So it's like we're both. I think it's like we've got the same brain.
Yeah, I don't mean to lie. It's just it's like what we talk about a lot, right? Which is just like foundations, as your article said, like build those foundations and then grow. You don't sort of grow and then, you don't sort of load up on, extend the foundations and hope to grow. It's kind of like, don't overextend the foundations rather, or skip the foundations and go to the top is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And I think it's just over-engineering things as well, which I'm definitely guilty of. I just spoke to you about that before, just over-engineering things a little bit. And the newsletter I'm talking about is just like benchmarking your wages and saying, well, if you're spending too much on wages, it's probably your second or third biggest expense in the business. You just got to cut those down, keep them sort of around that healthy 10 or 11% of monthly revenue. And again, I'm not privy to anything here, but the fact that the news is they let 20 people go probably hasn't worked out all of that well, and it maybe is an over-engineering of a business. By the way, it's a fantastic brand that I love, and I think I would just say that they are, absolutely a behemoth here in Australia.
But obviously, with things a little bit more challenging from an economic perspective, no one is immune for these challenges. Even the biggest brands, in the world, it doesn't matter how big you are or how attractive you are, you are probably going to be encountering some headwinds. Like if Apple is suffering, then I think everyone is kind of suffering in some way, shape, or form. And exactly to your point, like if you are trying to hire or scale up before you're ready to grow, which it sounds like they definitely have, or were anticipating growth which wasn't there, it can put you in a much riskier position. So again, going back to what we've been talking about, really focusing on building those foundations, I think is really important, making sure that you have a solid foundation for growth. And yes, you can be like when money was a little bit freer, I guess, not that money's ever free, but when there was much more capital around the place and people were able to invest in growth and people were spending a lot more, you could kind of take those bolder bets. But I think the watchword now is very much about, efficiency and being much more conservative with how we think. Not that we shouldn't take big, bold bets, but they need to be much more considered than perhaps what they've ever had to be before.
Yep, and I think we're feeling that a bit. Like we talk about that a lot, but I'm just thinking of the retailers that have come into Ecom Nation lately, and to us as well. And a lot of them are starting to. When I ask that goal, like, well, so where do you want to be? A lot of them are starting just to talk a little bit about more. Well, my profit's not quite there, and that's kind of good. I feel like people are being forced to change because it is hard out there. But I just do see a slight shift towards people focusing on profits a little bit, which is good.
Yeah, I think that can always only lead to much better things.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so we're going to move now on to our second story, which is one which has been bubbling away for a number of years now, which is that buy now, pay later is soon to be regulated as credit. So this is something which has been on the boil for about 3 years now, two or 3 years, I think, when they first started making some noise about this potential draft legislation. The Albanese government has now released their draft legislation, which is looking to regulate buy now, pay later, so BNPL products in Australia as credit, which means that BNPL providers like Afterpay or Square, ZipPay, LimePay, etc., will need to hold an Australian credit license, which along with that does mean that there's going to be much more scrutiny in terms of like what they can approve. So suddenly those barriers, there's going to be a lot more barriers to be able to access BNPL. Paul, your take on what this could mean for retailers? Is this something which we need to be worried about or just
I don't know.
more aware of?
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is long overdue. Well, I mean, in terms of whether it's warranted or not, it's long overdue in terms of it's been inevitable for a long time. I do think in many respects the BNPL bubble has popped a little bit. It's not a novelty anymore, and there's so many companies that do it. Just looking at PayPal's Shop in 4 and so on. I don't know. What does it mean for consumers? I guess it'll be harder to, it'll be slower to get approved. They probably will tighten up on who they actually give credit to if there are credit checks being done. So probably more people will be rejected, I'm assuming. Look, I don't know, Mal, any companies who grew on the back of BNPL. You know what I mean? Like, it did help. I definitely saw AOVs jump with people who used BNPL, and probably, I'm sure it did help some conversions, but for me, it wasn't, nobody's business is built on the back of a BNPL. So I think consumers who want your product will find a way to pay for your product. And if they can't afford it, they shouldn't be buying it. I don't really see this as changing anything, to be honest. I think retailers will just have to be a little bit mindful of having a nice spread of payment options. You might keep a look at your checkout and see if your percentage of consumers is moving away from Afterpay and Sezzle and Klarna. And if it is, you may elect to take it off the product page or shift the order in which checkout options are displayed. But I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep about this, Mal. What do you think?
Look, I think it's going to have a bigger impact than we think, but it's going to affect different industries in different verticals differently. So I think in particular where there have definitely been some verticals like fast fashion, for instance, which does rely quite heavily on BNPL, at least the ones which I've seen when I've looked at the numbers there, where I think any business where you have about 20% or so of your checkouts using BNPL, you're probably going to suffer some sort of correction on that. But the benefit of this is that, that hopefully people are going to be able to make smarter, more informed decisions. So while there could be some short-term pain, I think it's going to lead to more longer-term sustainability in terms of how people are going to be shopping, for products, that they're going to be thinking twice, about what they buy. And I think particularly when the Australian government is also talking about the Seamless initiative, which Tammy Plibersek has been championing, which is going to be looking at introducing more ethical and sustainable practices in fashion retail. This kind of goes hand in hand with that, because suddenly that lowest common denominator, so to speak, of consumer who isn't as savvy about things and is just going to buy things because it's cheap, suddenly they're going to be not able to access that same fund anymore. And I remember when I did a stint in fintech a little while ago, in a similar area, when I was looking at the people who were most likely to be in some sort of financial stress due to BNPL, it was always a young male or a young female, aged like 20 to 24. Thereabouts, possibly even younger, who weren't aware of everything in there. They were just taking BNPLs after BNPL after BNPL, and they were getting hit with all sorts of fines and things like that, and were just completely unaware of it. And they just ended up stuck in a cycle. And when you're in a position where you're using buy now, pay later to buy things like your groceries, you're in a lot of trouble. And when I was starting to see that, hopefully this will start to change that behavior, where if you can't access it anymore, you have to then start to have a better degree of financial literacy, which can hopefully only help you. And so hopefully with better product disclosures about what's actually involved in accessing these services, what it actually means when you, with the fines that are involved, hopefully it just means that people are going to make smarter decisions. And yes, it may mean that some verticals like fast fashion may suffer, but hopefully it just means that people are then going on to make more sustainable choices. Because if they then go, well, I need to actually buy the better quality garment rather than just buying the cheapest thing I can find, which I'm going to use Afterpay for and, things like that, I'm going to start making better decisions. Hopefully. This is my hope. This is like my idealist hat on. I've been wrong about this many times before.
Interesting. There's definitely, I think that's a really interesting hypothesis. There's definitely an idea that if I don't have to pay for it now, I'll just wear it. And if it doesn't fit, I won't even send it back, or I'll churn and burn it. So that's interesting. I don't think we'll know the answer to that fully, but that's an interesting hypothesis.
Yeah, we'll see this over the next couple of years, see what happens. But I think in the meantime, though, if you are worried, actually, I would probably suggest with anyone, just have a look now. Just have a look now and see how much of your sales are through a buy now, pay later service, and figure that out as a percentage. And I'd probably say that if you're doing more than double digits percentage wise, then really have a think about how you can replace that income, or potentially find other ways to help your customers still transact with you.
Yeah, I think fast fashion is the one you hit on. Some of those brands have 50% or more using Afterpay, let alone BNPL. So it's like, get ready for that failed, that failed application. And then what do you show them straight after their application fails? Again, I'm just assuming that more people will fail the credit check.
Yeah. All right. Now we're going to move on into our last story / coverage of an article, like a fantastic article, which Karina from the Ecom Nation team shared with us last week, which is about Vogue Business. So Vogue Business released a pretty significant study called How Gen Z Broke the Marketing Funnel. It's quite an amazing read, which I would highly recommend everyone have a look at. But there's quite a few things in here which I thought would be worth kind of picking up on, particularly around obviously the Gen Z behavior and what they're doing around how they engage with brands and how they purchase now. It seems that Gen Z, for everything we say about them, first of all, are less impulsive than we thought. They are actually much more considered shoppers than millennials and older generations, in that when they see a brand online, they're more likely to be researching that. And in particular, it shows that there's actually quite a lot of behavior of Gen Zs who are starting on platforms like TikTok and Instagram with a search. So they're not going to these platforms as what we previously thought, just to look at funny memes and things like that. They're going there to research. They're going there to understand how products fit, how they look, how they wear. Paul, are you surprised at all by this change in behavior?
It was a really good article, I thought, by Vogue Business. I think it's kind of like, we know that this generation they use social media to consume just about everything. And they talk about it in the article as an infinite loop of inspiration, exploration, community, and loyalty. So I guess the crux of it is this Gen Z doesn't fall into the typical marketing funnel. But the part that is interesting, and we know this, like we've all been hearing this, is that they use TikTok to search for things. Well, not just TikTok, right? Instagram and so on. And I just don't think, we're you see some brands, I think you mentioned July probably does this pretty well on TikTok and so on. But I think for the most part, we are not doing this very well. I don't think we have full funnel strategies in platforms like TikTok for the most part. It's kind of like, let's run an ad and see what happens. I think the community aspect is interesting. So they really want to belong to a community. They want to discover things. So even that, it's like, how do you sell your product to people without just shoving it down their face? But how do you educate people, entertain people on TikTok before bringing them down that path to purchasing? I think it's really interesting. Like, it's really difficult, in my opinion, because TikTok is just a beast that's so different. And I know we're not just talking about TikTok, but the part of me that the part that I found really interesting is that they really want to belong to community. They just everyone says they're just in it for 3 seconds, they look and then they're out, but not true. Like, they still do want to belong and be inspired. And that's cool. I think that's really cool. Big challenge for us as online retailers to figure that shit out, really.
Well, I think it does open up a lot of opportunities as well, because like you say, that behavior has changed from being, hey, I'm just going to put an ad in front of you. Someone's going to purchase, someone's going to see the ad, buy it, and then that's it. Yes, they may see the ad and it may, prompt some sort of discovery, but then they're going to want to do that discovery phase. They're going to want to go into TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, find out more about the brand and understand who the different brands are. And they call out, like you said, that they want to feel like they're part of something as well. Is that brands who do create that universe, I think was the quote in there, where it's not just about like, here's a product, but there's a whole brand universe around that. Are going to have an advantage. And you look at some of the brands who are doing incredibly well on there at the moment, like July, like we talked about before, they're doing some really great stuff, in terms of just like how they just show there's a certain lifestyle to living with July products. But I think another one who don't necessarily do it on TikTok, but do it really well is, again, G'd Up, one of our favorite brands. They do a great job in terms of how do they show their brand as not just being the garment, but being a whole experience, outside of that. On the weekend, they had like rappers in New York, Nez, who I'm not into hip hop, but Nez was, had shut down Manhattan, wearing like a big red G'd Up hoodie in a car with G'd Up on it. So there was this huge moment around that brand. Another artist, Pot of Paper, last week in the UK, in one of his shows was wearing a big G'd up hoodie in there. So there's a whole experience around the brand just being like coming outside of just being buy my garment. They're creating all these experiences, like a couple of fights, couple of mixed martial arts fights and boxing fights on the weekend that were sponsoring those as well. There's a whole experience around that brand. In the same way, Nike was doing that as well, where you go to like a high school football game, you see Nike signs there. You've got the apparel, you've got your favorite athletes who are wearing it. They're just hitting you on so many different levels about what that brand's about. That you just become a fan, not just of the product, but of the brand. So when stuff comes out from there, you're just like, well, I'm a G'd up customer. I'm a Nike customer because I feel like I'm part of something rather than just being, well, I like their clothes, which is generally substitutable. And I see that a lot in activewear, where people will tend to just like churn through different brands. They like a brand for a little bit, then they'll go, oh, you know what? I'll try something new. There's no loyalty in that. But then you see some brands which just tend to be a little bit stickier. Where people, once they wear it, they're just always wearing it because they feel like that community speaks to them. Yeah.
I agree. And it's a couple of other takeaways from this article, Mal, is that something we'll talk about a lot is like 57% of millennials prefer to use YouTube, even ahead of TikTok. YouTube is still a massive, if not the biggest platform, and it's way underutilized in Ecom, but it is a massive, so YouTube ahead of TikTok in terms of Gen Z looking for learning about brands, products, services, experience. So straight away, massive gap. What are we doing on YouTube? Not enough is the answer. The other part that I found really interesting is that influencers are seen in that space, Gen Z space, as the ones who create the trends. Not celebrities. It's more, by far, the most influential are still influencers, as we all knew. Celebrities don't really rank. Way ahead of millennials in terms of how they look at influencers. And they don't believe that brands create the trends. 15% said brands create the trends. So if you want to be in Gen Z, you should be looking at YouTube as a channel, and you should be really doubling down your influencer strategy, which sounds obvious, but still now heaps of brands not doing it. And the other thing is a lot of brands will say Gen Z's not my target. Well, guess what? They're going to be. Because people get older. So what do we expect is going to happen when Gen Z becomes 30 and our 30-year-olds are retiring and not spending? What do you think is going to happen? So even if Gen Z is not your target, evolution will say that they will be at some point, and we've just got to get in there. We've got to rip the Band-Aid off, get in there and start talking to them.
Yep. At the end of the day, who has more disposable income? As a percentage of the wallet, which is actually discretionary spend, Gen Z. They don't have mortgages. They typically won't have kids. So they've got much more money to spend. So you do need to always be thinking about them, about how do you bring in that next wave of customers. Like I said before, it's not just a matter of just like having a brand and a product and telling people you're cool. You need to find those right partnerships. You need to find those moments where you can be part of that culture, be part of the discussion so that they will see that you're relevant and want to buy from you.
You know what's funny, Mal, is looking at, again, the survey, is that Gen Z really rely on the algorithm. They understand the algorithm. They know that what they're getting served, they trust the algorithm. Even the fact that they talk in that way is just shows the importance of continually serving relevant content with consistency on platforms like TikTok and YouTube, and not just running ads, but being consistent so that the algorithm puts you in front of these people, because they reckon they're gaming the algorithm. But anyway, they understand.
I found that comment interesting as well, because I think it's very rarely that you're gaming the algorithm. I'm pretty sure the algorithm is designed to game you.
Yeah, I think so too.
Maybe you only know that when you get to a certain age.
Yeah.
You kind of see all the stuff that happens there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see that's actually another story we'll cover off at some point in terms of what happens with TikTok and the looming TikTok ban in the United States, as that bill has passed Congress, I believe, and is headed to Joe Biden's desk for approval. What will happen with TikTok at that point? But that is a discussion for another day. Paul, anything else to inform our listeners about before we sign off?
Not really. Hope everyone has a good week ahead, wherever you might be. If you give us a like, give us a follow, let us know. Feel free to suggest topics. We're always interested in that. Mal, what are you up to this week?
No, I think that's about it. Next week, I am going to be doing a free masterclass about how to create that strategic planning, which is a topic which I'm very passionate about. I see too many people just like running through a checklist when they do things on e-commerce. So I'm running a free workshop just to teach people a little bit about strategic planning and running through a framework which I've been using for the better part of 20 years already. So that'll be a bit of fun.
Where can they get on? Where can they get onto it?
You can find out about it on LinkedIn. Head to the Ecom Nation LinkedIn, or head to our website, and you'll be able to find out more information. You can go to ecomnation.com.au/events.
Nice.
All right, everyone. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.
See you guys.